Hey, this is Stef, and welcome to the Together Moving Forward podcast. Hello, everyone. I'm Stef Vachon, and I'm a human being. Again, welcome to the Together Moving Forward podcast, finally loving and respecting ourselves. This is a podcast for the 2S LGBTQI+ community, along with our friends, allies, and all human beings. Today is already the last episode of season 1.
Oh no!
Time flies way too fast. It feels like just yesterday that this journey started. And here we are wrapping up an incredible first season. To start, I need to say that I'm not a psychologist, a specialist, or someone with a college degree. I'm just a regular guy here to share with you all and support each other. I won't tell anyone what to do or how to do things. Instead, I'll share my journey and we will all share our journeys together. We'll learn from each other how to move forward. Before we meet today's guest, I want to take a moment to reflect on everything we've built together. This podcast started as a vision, a space to share stories, inspire change, and bring our community closer. But it wouldn't have been possible without you. Your support, your engagement, and your willingness to be a part of these conversations have truly made this podcast a reality. As I've said before, I never thought in a million years I would be creating a podcast with social media visibility. I had to learn everything from scratch. I had no clue how to start and do any of this. But at some point, I realized that we only have one life to live. I didn't want to look back one day with regrets, thinking I should have done it. So I took a leap of faith. I have a background in graphic design, so I went back to school, studied digital marketing and podcast production. And here we are. I truly hope that listening to and participating in this project has helped you as much as it has helped me to move forward, to grow, and to better understand the importance of unity in our community. So from the bottom of my heart, merci. Thank you for listening, for sharing, and for believing in this project. And don't worry, this is just the beginning. Season 2 is already in the works, and I can't wait to keep moving forward with you all. But for now, let's dive into the final episode of Season 1 with today's guest, who has an inspiring story about his journey as a parent. Gary's journey is one of resilience, transformation, and advocacy. Coming out in the 80s, he once believed that parenthood wasn't an option for him, just like me. But as laws and attitude evolved, so did his perspective. Not only did he become a father, but he also turned his experience into a powerful force for change, advocating for minority rights and fighting for a more inclusive world. I can't wait for you to hear his conversation. Let's go meet Gary right now. So Gary, welcome to the Together Moving Forward podcast, and thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for inviting me, Steph. Happy to be here.
Okay, so Gary, you came out in your 20s during the 80s. What are some key moments you would like to share with us today?
Well, you just outed me in terms of my age, so I guess I have to talk about what is almost ancient history now. It was a really different time, I find. If I kind of compare my coming out back then to, friends and colleagues who I see coming out these days. I mean, first of all, in the workplace, is a very different situation. You'd not necessarily come out in the workplace at all. And if you did, it was only with people that you felt close with, that you were sure of. It wasn't kind of a blanket thing. It wasn't something you announced to everybody. There was a little bit of an aspect, too, of you understood that you could be rejected by friends, family, a whole lot of, pretty much everybody around you. So it was a little bit of a jump or an act of faith when you came out, because you could potentially lose a lot. And I recognize that that's still the case today, but I think it was that much more the case back in the 80s, because really we had no models for this type of thing. I mean, you couldn't point to a whole lot of people. There are a few celebrities running around and people in the entertainment business in general, but it wasn't a mainstream thing. And I guess the big thing for me, in the 80s, towards the end of the 80s, I was in my 20s, my early 20s, and it was the whole idea that this is what I felt inside, but it had consequences. And one of the biggest consequences was you're not going to have any kids. You're not going to have a family. You could have a
Yeah.
partner. People didn't talk about marriage, so it was a partner. It was somebody to spend your life with, but you were far from any kind of mainstream recognized relationship. And I think children at that time, I wasn't ready to have kids, but it was in the back of my mind. It was something like, it's just not going to happen. And that's a tough thing to kind of accept.
If I may say, I felt exactly the same, but I remember being really, really young and wanting to be a dad and wanting to have kids and wanting to have my own family. And I became so jealous and resentful of other people that I stopped going to events. I stopped going to weddings, family reunions, because I was so tired of seeing everybody else happy with their partner getting married and having kids, and being there thinking like, why can't I have that, and feeling ashamed but not knowing why should I feel ashamed, and did not understand why I could not have this.
I I think for me it was almost structural. I just put it out of my mind, and this is just an impossibility for me.
Okay.
And I took my life somewhere else. I mean, I was living with somebody at the time. We moved to Europe. I lived there for a good 10 years. I had a very busy life, traveling all over the world. And I remember the day that this kind of came back, the whole question of being a parent came back really, really quickly, rushing back into my life. I was on my way out the door. My bags were packed for a business trip, and the phone rang, and it was my partner's older brother, also a gay man with his partner, and had been with his partner for a long time. And they were calling to announce to us that they were adopting a child in China. It was back in the time, and this was kind of the second half of the 90s. You couldn't do it as a couple, but they did it as a single man.
Single. Yeah.
And I can remember standing in the hallway of my apartment at the time with my bags in my hands, and my world flipped. And I had to walk out the door because my taxi was waiting for me downstairs. But all of a sudden, something that I had never thought would ever be possible in my life kind of became a potential reality.
Hmm. Well, I did the same thing where I forgot. I put it on the side and thought, well, this is never going to happen for me. So, and me and my husband, actually, we're watching a movie called Lion. I don't know if you've seen that. And it's about this Indian boy being adopted in Australia. And we cried the whole movie. And we had talked about it earlier, and I was like, oh, I'm getting too old. I should be thinking of retirement. And then the next day, I woke up and I just texted him and I said, I changed my mind. Are you still willing to? And he said, of course, yes. And then it just started right then from the moment on. And I just want to add, now we're talking about kids. My son is at home being sick, so you might hear some coughing and sneezing. So it's normal.
I commiserate with you. My son was sick this week too, but he's 19 now, so it's a different thing. It's a man's cold. It's much worse than your little kid.
So Gary, what led you to become an advocate for minority rights?
An advocate. I think maybe it's the first time that anyone's ever called me an advocate. I had never really been involved in the LGBTQ community before as a an advocate or a militant until I had kids and until our first child came to us. And I think one of my thoughts in that initial time was my son, who is Black, is going to he's going to experience racism, maybe other types of discrimination. And I didn't want there to be an additional layer of discrimination that was linked to homophobia, the fact that he's got two dads.
Yeah.
So I guess I kind of just fell into it. I don't think I ever made a decision that I was going to become an advocate. I started to reach out to groups to see if there was, if there were other couples like us and other families like us, thinking that it would be great for us, but it would also be great for my son as he grew older. And I came across the Quebec LGBT Family Coalition, which at the time actually was still the Lesbian Mothers Association of Quebec. So technically, I was a lesbian mother for a certain period of time, which I'm actually quite proud of. But anyway, that's also ancient history. And so together with the director of the Lesbian Mothers Association, we decided that we were going to found a mixed group of men and women. There weren't that many men. I mean, we're talking, this is back in 2006. The law had changed fairly recently in Quebec, and there weren't a lot of male couples that were out there, or single men for that matter, that had kids yet. But it was starting, and so we started doing activities, and I realized that there was a lack of support, maybe a lack of resources out there as well. So I got involved very quickly in training and set up a training course for future parents that was really focused on adoption, but was also focused on looking at surrogacy, which was also very rare at the time, but has become much more common than it was at that time. And through working with the LGBT Family Coalition, I started doing, training courses elsewhere. And the coalition does a lot of training. They've trained about 80,000 professionals across Quebec on issues of homophobia, family diversity, how to better work with our families, and ensure that there are better spaces for our kids, both in the school system, within the health system, et cetera. And I can remember at some point through that process, somebody called me a militant, and I was a little bit startled until I realized that I guess I was. When you're out doing this sort of work and speaking with people and defending points of view and going into parliamentary commissions to talk about stuff, well, yeah, I guess at some point that's pretty much who you are.
And me and my husband took the weekend with you. That's where we met you, and it was so helpful to us to give us a lot of hints and how to go through with the process.
You know what? I often wonder, had my husband and I taken a course like that before we started our adoption journey, if we would have continued. We kind of went into it naive. We really didn't know what we were getting into. We had thought about it a lot. We thought about what are our options. We were very comfortable with the idea of adoption, but we really didn't know how the whole thing was going to work. But I think it's important for us to kind of create a space where people can learn about this, but also a network. I see that. I've been doing that now for probably pretty much 17, 18 years. And I see cohorts moving through that, and quite often because they're at the same time in their parental journey, they become friends, and then they get kids together, and their kids become friends, and they spend time with each other. And so, a lot of people in the adoption community in Quebec don't really have that support group, and we do within the coalition. I think it's a really important thing.
And also, we have different laws in Quebec. Would you like to talk about how the process was to adopt your own children?
Yeah, so a lot of people in Quebec, when they adopt through what we call the mixed bank, which is a foster to adopt program. So contrary to other provinces in Canada and a lot of other jurisdictions in North America for that matter, there are no private adoption agencies in Quebec for kids that are born here. People do go internationally, and there are adoption agencies that help them do that. But all other adoptions, so for kids that are residing here, are done through the government. And the foster to adopt program, it's an interesting one. It can be a tough one. You're never really sure what's going to happen with the future of your child. Is that child going to be judged adoptable at some time and you'll be able to adopt him or her? There's a possibility that the child's biological family will kind of work out whatever problems they had at the beginning and become involved in the child's life again, to one extent or another. In our case, we've got 2 kids from mixed bank, one very fast file, if you'd like. Raphael came to us at the age of 4 months, and he was about a little over 2 when his adoption was finalized. Our daughter, Marie, came 3 years later, so she was 8 months old at the time, and her adoption wasn't finalized until she was 8. So it was a very long process, not necessarily easy for her, or for us for that matter. A very different feeling, I guess, because she did have a lot of contact with her biological family through that. I would say an enriching experience for us in a different way, because we can talk to her a lot about her biological family. But it does mean a very different relationship between us and our kids than you would have in a traditional biologically based family, where you don't have to talk about these really emotionally charged subjects. And, especially when kids hit their teenage years and they start having identity crises and thinking about who they are and where they belong in this world. It's something that we deal with every day. It's very challenging, and it's not over yet.
No, it took us 4.5 years for the adoption to go through. Like you were saying, now he's 8 years old. Our son is 8 years old, and he's starting to understand and ask questions. But he came with us. He was 3.5, so he remembers a lot of his old life. So, but just trying to understand, and everything is a little bit mixed up in his head. But it's a pretty interesting process right now. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's a tough thing for people to understand, even when they're adults. I think there's aspects of the process that are really complicated, but there's also just aspects of adoption and where do I fit in that are really tough for anybody to understand. But at those ages, it's that much more difficult. And I see our daughter's 16. She asks a lot of questions, and even some of her memories of the time are not quite exact because she was interpreting that as a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old. So it's quite a different experience. And so we do talk a lot about that around the dinner table.
Okay, so Gary, what does self-love and self-acceptance means to you?
Wow, that's a big question. I think I've taken a lot of time to come to a point where I respect myself for who I am, and I'm confident in who I am, and I feel comfortable with that. Part of that, I guess, is accepting my sexuality and then accepting the fact that that's different from a lot of people's experience. I think, though, that I've gone beyond acceptance. Now I'm proud of the differences, and differences plural in my life. It's not just my sexuality, but it's also the fact that I'm a parent, the fact that I live in a not a biracial, but a triracial family. My husband's Mexican. Our kids are of Haitian descent. All of that kind of pulls together to be something that makes me who I am today. And then, with all the life experiences that I've had, I guess now I look back on that and I think that's what my strength is. And I bring that strength to any life situation that I have. I quite often, I work in a big company and I've been there for quite some time now. So a lot of people come to me kind of looking for mentoring. And the first few times that it happened, I was a little bit surprised because I didn't see myself as being a mentor. But what is kind of reflected back at me is, you know who you are, you're comfortable with that. You've done lots of things in your life. I want to learn how to get to a point where I can be as self-assured, I guess, as you are. And I've never thought of myself as being self-assured, but I guess, I kind of have to realize that maybe that's where I am now in my life. But that for me is self-love, is that kind of realizing who you are, being comfortable with it, being happy about it, being proud that you were able to do it, and bringing that in your baggage to any situation that you you come across. And taking the time to kind of relish in the fact that that's where you are and who you are, and that you did that yourself. I think that's really important to kind of look back and to realize what kind of a person you've made yourself.
Yeah. What has been one of your toughest obstacle you've had to overcome?
I think probably one of the toughest things that I've lived with was linked to my feeling of being a parent or not being able to be a parent. I can remember when I came out. It's somewhere, I think I still have this letter. My mother wrote to me, and my father never wrote, but kind of wrote through my mother, I guess. She said to me in this letter, your dad's really concerned about what kind of an impact this is going to have on your career, and are you going to be able to get a good job? And that was one of the big concerns back at that time, right? And I can, I look back on that now and I think that has never really been an impediment for me. I don't think. Maybe it has, but I'm not terribly conscious of it. But what has always been kind of that big obstacle for me was, you're going to be able to have a family. And working through that and kind of accepting the fact that, the world around you has changed and it's possible now, but also you make a pretty good parent. I think that coming to that realization has been a really big obstacle, but I guess it's behind me now.
Me too. Once I could see, what a good dad I was, and how good we are together, me and my husband, to our son. It heals a lot of things, and it makes you realize that you're allowed to have all those things too, and you're good at it, which is.
It's a really good point, because you're allowed to have that sort of thing. It's kind of a limitation that we get from outside of us, but that we interiorize, right? And so you do have to kind of evacuate that at some point to move on. And it's a really important thing to not only get rid of it, but to realize that that's a real strength in your life.
Yeah, I have a little story where, when we had our son, when he came in with us, every little things that people take for granted, for me, was just like sometimes overwhelming with so much emotions. I remember the first time I took him to kindergarten, and then I saw all the other dads and mom, and I just started bawling, and I was trying not to show that I was so happy. It was like things that people take for granted, that we were told we were not even allowed to. And you accept, like you said, kind of accepted it, but with resentment. But just to do all these little things, and holding my boy's hand in the street and taking him to school or whatever, all those little things are like, wow, to me every day, What helps you maintain hope and positivity during these tough times like today?
Wow. I mean, in the context that we're living right now, and seeing what's happening just south of us, so it's a really pertinent question. Right after what I call the Orange Menace assumed the presidency in the U.S., one of my really good friends in the U.S. reached out to me, and one of the things that he said, he's an old soul. He's worked to counter discrimination all of his life, and he said, "This too will pass." And I guess I take that to heart. And every time that I think that things are really, really bad, that's what I come back to. I mean, I can't, I'm a positive person in general. I can't help feeling a lot of sadness about what's going on, and fear for a lot of my friends who are living things that are not really easy. And I think when that happens, I tend to go back to the little things, the really simple things. Spring today, there are going to be plants starting to sprout at one time. That's always a really magical thing for me when we hit this time of the year and the snow's starting to go, and all of a sudden you see those first plants starting to poke out of the ground, and you realize that that's life. And it has to be those little things that kind of make that difference. Looking up at a tree in the wind and seeing the branches move, just little things like that that can bring a smile to your face, or connecting with somebody that you haven't connected with for a long time, and realizing that there is still that contact and that connection that establishes itself really quickly. You got to take pleasure in the little things. It's we talk about a lot about queer love, and I think that's a part of it too. Is coming back to this idea that understanding that you've constructed your life in a way that suits you, that doesn't necessarily suit everybody in society, but that's not important because you surround yourself with your friends, your chosen family, and that's where you go and you source your energy and your strength. And I think that's that's my safe space. That's the space that I go back to on a regular basis. And I guess that, and my dog greeting me when I come in the door every day, those are the important things.
And I think also to get involved in the community like you're doing and you've been doing, I think it helps to go through these hard times. You feel like you're doing something,
Yeah, it's, you're involved, you're surrounding yourself with people who are maybe not entirely like-minded, but that share certain values with you.
Mm.
And so despite all that you see on the media and what's going on in the news, you do take that energy from other people, and that's a positive energy rather than a negative energy. I agree that it's important to surround yourself with that positive atmosphere, but it's also important to feel like you're doing something, that you're making a difference. Even if it's just a small one, at least you're moving in the right way.
Mm. What advice would you offer to someone who's struggling with self-acceptance?
I think I'd say, start to think about what you've done that corresponded to you and to your own values, and take pride in that. I think we all build our lives in a certain way, and we build on certain building blocks. And there are times when we get to a point where we're not sure anymore. I quite often say to my teenagers who are still kind of building that identity, it's like when they come to a place where they're in almost a crisis, quite often I'll look at them and I'll go, look, did anybody die? No. Did anybody get hurt? Not really. Okay. So it's not that much of a crisis. Let's come back to a solid place. What do you feel solid and strong about? And then build from there. Mm-hmm. And reach out to other people and kind of get a sense of, sometimes we don't have those discussions with our closest friends that can bolster us and reinforce our identities and reinforce who we are. Mm-hmm. But sometimes it's a good idea to kind of reach out to people and say, look, this is what I'm going through. What advice would you give me? And quite often it's not so much advice as much as, I think you're going in the right way, and I think you know who you are, and I think you're a strong person. And that in and of itself is probably enough. But definitely, if you really feel that you're struggling, you have to reach out to somebody that you trust and take on. It's not that much of sometimes I think we stop ourselves before we reach out and ask for help because we're afraid that we're going to inconvenience somebody in some way. I don't think you do. I think it brings people closer together when that sort of things happen.
And it helps sometimes the other person, even with what you're sharing and what you're talking about. So,
yeah, it's never a one-way street. Mm. You always discover something, I think, about yourself if you're in that much of an in-depth discussion with somebody about who they are and what they're living. And it does make you feel different after having a discussion like that.
Totally agree. So, Gary, who or what inspires you the most?
I've always been really curious and really impressed by people and what they've been able to do with their lives. And I think more than anything, people that that have lived vastly different things from me. Names that come to mind: Nelson Mandela, somebody who I was always very, very impressed by and very curious about. Rosa Parks, those people that kind of stood up for a value and weren't afraid to do it. People that migrate for thousands of kilometers to get to a better place to raise their kids or to get to a better place for their kids to live. Sometimes they die from it. Those people really impress me. And they've taken this huge chance to make things better for the people around them. My trans friends who, have just decided that finally they're going to live who they really are inside to the entire outside world. It's a huge, huge leap of faith and takes so much courage. And I find that it's just so, I don't know, inspiring. And so it lifts me up when I see that. And I've seen so many people, it's like a flower opening up all of a sudden because they're really all of a sudden living the life that they've always felt deep inside. Incredibly, fantastically inspiring.
Yeah.
They're not really afraid of what people are going to think of them or how they're going to treat them because that's who they are. And then that's what they want to live. That I find is very inspiring.
It takes so much courage, yes.
It does. And I think it takes more and more courage in the world that we're living in.
Yeah.
Because you're never sure. And you're never sure what's going to happen.
What key message do you hope our listeners will take from this episode?
I think we've all got a tendency to try and judge each other way too much. You've got your own value system, your own way of seeing the world, and you try and see people through that lens. More and more, I think what I try to do is accept people for who they are. And that goes as far as, referring to them in the way that they want to be referred to, accepting their differences, respecting them in general. And I think that's very important. We're all so different. And it makes no sense for us to try and ignore those differences or try and limit them. People have different life experiences, even if they look the same and they're the same color and they're the same gender, they're vastly different. And I think that's what we have to take solace in, is that humans are diverse. And for me, what is most important for me is I think finding out what the differences of that person is and then kind of rejoicing in them and realizing that that's the person that I have in front of me and I can learn from that person. So judge less, accept and respect more.
Because if we don't want to be judged, that's what we have to do ourselves with others, right?
Exactly. And it's, what use is it to really start to judge people? Doesn't get you anywhere.
No. Well, Gary, thank you so much for being with us today. And I will put on the bio the website of the Family Coalition with the work you're doing. That would be, if people want to know more about it, it's going to be right there for you. So it was really nice to see you again. And I'm sure we'll see you probably at Pride this year, maybe earlier, probably earlier. We never know.
Definitely. Thanks a lot, Steph, for inviting me. It was a great talk.
Thank you so much. What an inspiring conversation with Gary. His journey reminds us that life doesn't always follow the path we once imagined, but sometimes it leads us to something even greater. From navigating self-acceptance to breaking barriers in parenthood and advocacy, Gary's story is a powerful testament to resilience, growth, and the importance of standing up for what we believe in. My dear friends, it's already time to say au revoir just for now. Season 2 will debut on Wednesday, July 16th. So there will be a short break until then for the podcast, but not for our social media. We will still be very active on our social media. I suggest that you listen to your favorite podcast episodes again and share them with your friends. I will also continue posting a positive thought series on our social media. A great way to start your day by reading them in the morning and putting yourself in a great mood for the day ahead. I also invite you to participate in these positive thought series. You can find great examples on our website, togethermovingforwardpodcast.com, and on our social media. This is a wonderful way to show the world who we truly are. We need to show that we're here, united more than ever, stronger, loving and respecting ourselves. Together, we are moving forward. Just go to our Instagram profile, look under the positivity highlight. Choose one positive thought that resonates with you, take a selfie or record a short video of yourself sharing the positive thoughts, then send it to me. I will handle sharing all of them on our social media. Everybody, share this podcast and spread the good news. Please remember, solidarity beats hate. The more we unite, the stronger we become. Because at the end of the day, we are all equally human and we all deserve the same rights. One last thing before I go. Put your hand on your heart and repeat after me. All of us together. I honor my feelings and trust my journey. Yes, I honor my feelings and trust my journey. My dear friends, see you again real soon for the first episode of Season 2 of the Together Moving Forward podcast. À très bientôt. Ciao.